Chapter 13, Sticky Notes. The case study is about Oregon and how it wanted to manage growth and developed something called an urban growth boundary. Over here on page 337, we have a couple of terms that you need to know. You need to know the definition of urban versus rural. So if you're in a city or an area of more than 2,500 people, you're considered urban. If you're less than that, it's considered rural. A suburban area is technically urban, but it's on the outskirts of the city center. So Santa Clarita is suburban because we're on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles or the west side or the other city centers that are in Los Angeles. So the world is moving from rural to urban. In fact, in the world and actually also in the United States, we just shifted to being slightly more urban than rural. It changes our politics as well because people in urban areas have different views on the role of government versus people in rural areas. But typically, as people move from rural to urban areas, you have a decline in birth rates. And so in the world, this is attributed to you don't need as many people on the farm. And so really, there's no more farmland. There's no more arable land. And so if you have children, let's say you live in Africa and you have 8 children, and you're a farmer and you own a little piece of land, well, really that little piece of land goes to the first kid or whoever wants it, and the other ones have to go find work, and work really is in the cities. And so as we add people to the world, they're going to really only find work in cities, and so that's why we estimate that the population growth will be urban. All right, so in general, why do people move to cities? Well, there's push and pull. People are pulled there because of jobs, better health care. I know people who've moved from rural areas to urban areas as they've gotten older, so they would be closer to health care and hospitals. Cities tend to provide better education, more college opportunities as well. Now, some people move to cities because of wars, because of famine in their rural area, or because of environmental degradation. So deforestation means that there's no more wood for heating. Animals are gone from that area, so you can't hunt them and eat them. And so what else can you do? You can't survive anymore without the forest, and so people move to cities. In general, we have a trend in the United States that people are moving basically from the north and the east to the west and the south. So California is growing, we know that, but places like Arizona that are in the west are growing as well. People get tired of the cold climate and they're moving away from the cold into the warmth. So the South, places like Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia are also growing in population. But then you have towns like Detroit that are shrinking in population because they're in the Northeast. Okay, so we have we have 2 different things here. And don't get them mixed up. So we have reasons why people move to cities in general, but once you're in a city, people move to the suburbs. Why do people move to the suburbs? And so these are reasons why. Now, sprawl is the spreading out of low density, so single houses on pieces of land, and so you end up your city grows horizontally and uses up a ton of land. So why do people move to the suburbs? Why do we all live in Santa Clarita? Well, first of all, without cars and roads, people wouldn't move to the suburbs. So this basically started after World War II. We have cars now, a lot of cars for the average person, not just the wealthy. We have our road system was developed during the Great Depression in the 1930s. And so we have roads, we have cars, we have cheap gas in the 1950s. And so people could live in the suburbs and drive into downtown to work. And so that was the first thing that sort of spurred the growth of the suburbs. Now, affluence, as people make more money, they want to buy that one house, and they want to have their car, and they want to have their little yard, and so the suburbs is also a sign of affluence. So if you make more money and you want to buy a house, usually the houses are cheaper in the suburbs. It's not always true, but it is often true. So even though Santa Clarita is a very expensive place to live, a house here is cheaper than a house down, let's say, in Silver Lake or one of the trendy parts of Los Angeles. It's about twice as much down there to buy a house. So there's cheaper homes in the suburbs. So as people get money, they get affluence, they want to buy a house, a lot of times they move to the suburbs because they want a cheaper house. And nowadays, if the houses are too expensive in Santa Clarita, they'll move even further out to the Antelope Valley, to Palmdale, to Lancaster, because they're cheaper there. People also want a little bit of a yard, and that's another reason for the suburbs too. People also move to places like Santa Clarita or other suburbs because they have better schools, less crime, and less pollution. So these are all reasons why people move to the suburbs. Okay, so we have here what's wrong with sprawl. And so it talks about what are these negative impacts. Well, transportation. So if everybody's driving a car to work instead of walking, like people used to walk to work or take the trolley, well, you add more air pollution and more greenhouse gases, and also more stress from driving as well. And then we have our pollution issue, health from stress and air pollution. Also, if people are driving to work instead of walking, then they will get, we have high rates of obesity and high blood pressure because of less exercise. We also use more land. Here's a little bit of information that you need to know as we turn forests into urban development. So in Santa Clarita, we don't have forests, we have chaparral. But let's say, for example, Atlanta. Atlanta is sprawling like crazy, and Atlanta is a forest, it's a temperate deciduous forest ecosystem. So as you turn Atlanta area, that forest, into urban development, so homes or businesses or schools or whatever, some things happen to the water cycle. Evaporation, transpiration, groundwater recharge all drop, and runoff increases. So these are the things that happen to the water cycle when you go basically from a forest into concrete. And these are, again, an add-on to your book. All right, turning to page 343, we see here that in a city we have zoning that basically tells you what you can do in certain areas. And so that's really a city planning. But we also have regional planning. And so let me talk about Santa Clarita. Santa Clarita, we have our city limits, but a lot of people live outside the city limits. Places like Stevenson Ranch are not technically in the city. Places like Fair Oaks Ranch over in Canyon Country, and then some of you on the outskirts of Saugus don't live in the city. So we have a regional plan that we developed the past couple years called One Valley, I can't remember the name, but basically it's a regional plan. So our city plan should go outside the scope of the city limits. So we worked with the county and the unincorporated areas and all those areas that are not technically in the city, and we worked with them to come up with a better plan for zoning and development and growth and parks and where jobs should be and where people should live. And we developed a whole region plan that goes beyond the scope of the city limits to include everybody. The vocabulary word municipal means having to do with a city, so we will use this word in our class. So if we say municipal water supply, it means the city water supply. Or municipal law is a city law, not a state law, but a city law. Okay, so how do we keep the nice things about a suburb, but kind of get rid of the negative things? And so a lot of city planners now are trying to work with smart growth principles. And one type of smart growth principle is new urbanism. So what do we try to do? And this is a picture in Florida, but it looks very similar to some developments we have in California. Think of Town Center Drive in Valencia. That's a new urbanism or smart growth. People can live in the apartments or condos up here. They can work in Princess Cruises and go to the movies and restaurants here. And across the street is a grocery store. So basically you have a walkable or bikeable community. And so we want mixed land uses, which is basically old school. In the olden days, people, like my great-grandfather was a printer. And so his print shop was below and they had an apartment above. That was pretty standard, or you would live in a walkable distance to your job. Well, then crime moved in and pollution with cars, and so people didn't want to live in the city anymore. And so how do we create the nice aspects of the suburbs with less commute and less pollution? And so that's what the smart growth and new urbanism movements are trying to do. A walkable, bikeable lifestyle where you can work and live in the same place with safety and cafes and really nice places. Downtown LA is trying to revitalize, and they are actually revitalizing. Sometimes we call that gentrification, which means kind of the poor are being moved out and the rich are being moved in fancy apartments and things in downtown. We're also trying to do this around downtown Newhall as well. And again, trying to make bikeable, walkable communities and revitalize certain areas. Now, some places can be built new in new urbanism, and some places can be rebuilt, and we call that a revitalization. And so downtown LA is experiencing that as well. All right, 346, we have these graphs. You will be asked on a test to interpret the graphs, and basically it's showing you the energy use, and the highest energy use is from cars versus other kinds of transportation, and then how much money it costs. So driving your own car to work costs you the most amount of money. So parks are really important in urban areas, and we have up here a picture of Central Park in New York City. And so parks provide green space, natural land, scenic beauty, recreation, purifying air and water, helps people get out in nature, which is biophilia. And so these are the importance of parks that you need to know. Okay, 348. So some cities that are trying to become more green and more livable for their citizens are developing greenways and green belts. So greenways are strips of land that connect parks or neighborhoods, and they're often along streams or canals, and so walking trails. When I go and grade AP tests in Cincinnati, they are revitalizing the river. So the Ohio River runs there, and it's right next to where we grade in the convention center in Cincinnati. And every time I go, they've added more walking and biking and parks and beautiful things to do along the river. It's really a nice thing to see happening. And then a green belt is kind of, well, it can be parklands that circle the whole city or in part of the city. When I lived in North Carolina, they had a lot of green belts that kind of ran through the city. Also note what a green building is, and buildings can become LEED certified to show how eco-friendly they are. There's several LEED certified. The Kohl's up on Golden Valley is a LEED certified building. The Transportation Hub in Santa Clarita is a LEED certified building. So we have several in town. We'll continue on with the next video.